The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Podcast with Alistair McLeod, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello, this is Alistair McLeod on behalf of Gold Money, and with me from somewhere in the centre of the United States of America is Jim Willie, who is the golden jackass, and he writes a lot on gold and writes some very, very good material, I must say. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. I have many clients with Gold Money, and I think they're one of the fine, reputable services in the world today, and there are not many.
Well, thank you for the advert. That wasn't solicited, I promise everybody. There's so much to talk about. I think probably, if we just stick to maybe, what's happening to money in America, what's happening to the economy there, and then perhaps if we could wrap up with what's going on in the gold market. Does that sound all right with you?
Sounds perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, well, if we start with the money, the Federal Reserve is just printing money like Billy-O. I mean, they've sort of really said, we are going to print with no limitation whatsoever. What effect do you think this is having on the economy?
I think it's causing an unavoided slow death process. The deterioration is constant, the deterioration is relentless, and the deterioration cannot be stopped. Because of the outsized U.S. government deficits and because of the absence of legitimate investors in U.S. Treasury bonds, they're stuck in Weimar mode. They can't get away from the 0% or else they'll crush the Treasury bonds, which are artificially low. They'll crush the derivative structure that supports it. And they can't get away from unlimited bond monetization because there's no buyers. And you've got chronic, huge it's like $1.3, $1.5 trillion a year. I mean, I forecasted back in 2009, get ready for annual chronic $1 trillion deficits. And all my detractors said, oh, no, this is temporary. Next year it'll be much lower.
Yeah, well, I think, and I'd be interested in your views on this. I think there are two reasons why it can't be lower. Firstly, the much vaunted economic recovery, which all the Keynesians were hoping for as a result of the stimulus, just is not arriving. And I think the second point that I have in mind is that welfare commitments are escalating at some unbelievable rate. So I can't see how we ever get back to any budget balance or even under balances of less than $1 trillion deficit. Is that how you see it?
Oh, very much. There are two enormous factors that guarantee that the typical Keynesian stimulus will not result in stimulus and will instead destroy the system. They're poking holes in the Titanic hull, and they're taking on water at all times, and it's going to sink. The two factors are China. Number one, before, if you offered very low interest rates, and Greenspan was very clear in 2003 and 2002, he said, this must be temporary. This cannot go more than 4 to 6 months, because if you do, you cause all kinds of entrenched, horrible problems. Okay, well, he knew. Well, what's missing this time is the opportunity in business to take advantage of the low interest rates for capital investment. It's called China. It's called China. Let's wake up to the Chinese effect from 1999, giving them the most favored nation trading status. What we did was we said to the United States economy, you're not going to be able to respond anymore to low interest rates because the foreign direct investment, the capital expenditure investment is all in Asia. So just don't worry about it. This is a death process. The second factor, adding to the costs and making them permanent, in very much the fascist theme, there's a word that begins with N and has a Z in it. I like to avoid it, but the fascist theme is war. War, war, and more war with endless costs. It's so bad that in the United States, in major sporting events, I mean like lots and lots of them, it's routine. They have an honor guard. They have a military on the side of the football field, of the baseball field, of the World Series event. This is ingraining. This is institutionalizing war in the society. So with the Chinese interfering with industrial and factory and business development and stimulus, and with the war with the added costs and the destructive trickle down, this is permanent. This is permanent. What I find is amazing is a blind spot among economists, and this is across all of Western Europe and the United States and Canada. They still think the 0% is stimulative and will eventually result in a good, healthy, strong response. And my reply and rebuttal has been firm, loud, and repeated. 0% kills capital.
Yeah, I think I do agree with that. The problem with 0%, Jim, is that it just destroys savings. And savings, of course, are the lifeblood for any economic progress, any economic development. And I try to use that phrase rather than recovery, because recovery is just a money term. And I mean, you can recover an economy just by pumping government spending into it, which is just nonsense. I mean, that's no quality of economic activity whatsoever. And what they're doing, it seems to me, with zero interest rates is they're just destroying savings. Is that how you see it, or I mean, what's your comments on that?
Well, that's one of several very important, relevant factors regarding 0% that smothers and kills the economy. When you've got here's a fact of economic life that economists just don't like to talk about, because most of them derive a paycheck from the financial sector, which is based on investment banking, which dominates government, which dominates a lot of different things. For every dollar that is borrowed, and like for a car loan or for a student loan or for a small business loan or some kind of a loan that must be amortized and paid back, for every dollar, there's about $1.50 in savings. So you've got more stimulus. I shouldn't use the word stimulus. You got more positive feedback response into an economy from higher interest rates than you do a savings from lower costs to borrowing. So it's a wet blanket. And you look at all the effect on pensioners. I mean, my father's got a stack of bank certificates of deposit. Look at all the pension funds. Look at all the different bond funds, even PIMCO. Bill Gross doesn't like bonds anymore. He just can't admit it openly, loudly. He's talking more about gold. All these different pension funds, these fixed income managed funds, institutions, they're being forced into buying mortgage bonds, and they got burned. They went for this extra 2% because the interest rate was so low, and they ended up losing 20 and 40% off their principal. No, the 0%, your point is valid. I like to point to something that's on the other side that completes a vicious cycle. The 0% forces all different management of funds to hedge against the inflation effect. Because the 0% is really saying money has a negative real cost. Well, if that's the case, you better hedge with something. So a lot of institutions hedge with gold and silver. A lot hedge with oil and gas and deposits. Other just across the board commodities. The end result of 0% is it raises the cost structure. And you don't have this corresponding rise in the final product prices, because China is there. So the 0% kills capital by raising costs and resulting in job cuts, business segment cutoffs, which interferes with income, which interferes then with savings. So you complete the loop. 0% kills capital, results in lower income, lower savings, which keeps the rate stuck at zero. It's a vicious cycle that is going to kill the Western economy.
Yeah, okay. I think I take the point, and I think that we see very strong evidence that it's actually achieving absolutely nothing. In terms of the economy itself, I mean, I've had people saying to me, well, there's a bit of money beginning to investment money going into housing, and, perhaps the house builders are going to see some pickup in activity. And there's all this sort of, the US economy is probably turning the corner. How do you feel about that, Jim? I think I can guess.
Well, I'm glad you laughed, because I think the laughter is very warranted. The U.S. economy is stuck in a -3 to -5% recession, has been for 4 years, and is now working on the 5th year, where I think it's going to be up toward -8%. There are no economic statistics in the United States free from distortion. Every single one of them is free of distortion. There's an effect in the housing market where they talk about the housing, average sale, average home price, all that. Well, in the economic statistic for job, if you don't count someone who's unemployed for over a year and a half, 2 years, well, then your jobless rate comes down. So don't count the chronic, don't count the discouraged. There's a parallel in housing. Don't count the home sale that was done by the banks. There was the short sale that is done in the background, that is done, say, in big blocks with, say, an investment bank on Wall Street, that's done with big blocks, say, to clear out some small amount of the Fannie Mae inventory. So let's not count all these short sales, and by gum, we look like we have stability in the housing sales and the housing home prices. I mean, it's all bollocks. I mean, I never use the word unless I'm talking to someone from Britain. It's bollocks. It's absolute bull. No. What you've got is housing market stuck in decline. What I look at is inventory of the banks for their home foreclosures. It's somewhere between 9 and 11 million homes in the United States. It's not clearing. Unless it clears, and until it clears, there's not going to be any recovery whatsoever. Now, I mean, the latest muck was the jobs report, and I tore apart in my October hat trick letter. I tore apart the October non-farm jobs report, where I can't remember exactly what they said the jobs growth was, but something like 100,000 jobs. I mean, it's just mind-boggling how absurd the economic statistics are.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, every time I see unemployment figures, if it looks good, it's going to be adjusted next month. It's just an absolute nonsense. And I think, as you point out, there is a huge difference between the, if you like, the sort of the narrower unemployment figures and the broader ones, including the chronically unemployed, which, do they call it U6 or something, which is running, according to John Williams, is running at well over 20%.
Well, the U6 by the government is running at 17 and 18%. It's still a little rosy, even though it's miserable. The John Williams shadow government statistics is running at 22 to 23%, which is equivalent to Spain, by the way. So the U.S. is Spain times 100 or Spain times 60. Take your pick. I don't care. You mentioned adjustment. Well, if you got a good statistic this month, look for it to be adjusted next month. No, what you've got something is far worse than that, Alistair. You've got adjustments that are taking place in a fictitious, distortive way every single month. I was in charge in my last professional job of substance. I had a job that really, I hesitate to put it on my resume for the last 2.5 years. It was between 2001 and 2004. I didn't like the job, but the job I had before that was working at the Office Superstore headquarters of Staples. And Staples is a very well-run company. It's got Harvard MBAs running all through management. Very fun place to work. A lot of excitement there. I was in charge of the seasonal adjustments for forecasting on store sales at the 1,200, 1,100 different stores. I was in charge of seasonality. And we had this hard, fast cardinal rule. Don't change anything for 2 to 3 years. It must be stable. If it's not stable, then you don't know what the seasonal pattern is to adjust from. So what they're doing in the U.S. government and Bureau of Labor Statistics and all their total nonsense is they're adjusting every single month. They're changing their adjustment coefficients every single month. So what they're doing is they're achieving whatever final measure they want by doing an adjustment that changes every single month. I tore apart in the October Patrick letter the non-jobs payroll, and it was, let's just call it 100,000 for argument's sake. Well, gee, the Conference Board, which I believe is the most respected of all the different federal statistical analyst crew, they had a decline in the labor market for 3 of the last 4 months going into October. That's not consistent with a good non-farm jobs. The payroll tax, this is my favorite statistic. It's just simple payroll income tax withholdings. There's no adjustment. It's just, okay, what do they collect for taxes? Well, that's been down consistently year over year. How about Social Security payments? That's down year over year. How about self-employment contributions? That's down year over year. Now, what they're doing now is they're relying on the birth-death model in addition to their other constant monthly adjustments. And the birth-death model is responsible for something like 1 million jobs in the last 12 months. Maybe a little bit more. And every March, they have their annual, very quiet revision of the past year's distortions where they get rid of 1 million or 1.5 million jobs. And they try not to talk about it. They try not to have a press release about it. The other triangular coordination, when I was at Staples, I had a brilliant manager, and we were both PhDs, so we didn't have to get in each other's ego territory. We didn't step on each other's each other's toes. This guy had a nice method. He said, look, use a triangular method. Come at it from 3 different sides. Think of it as three legs on the stool. Well, the National Federation of Independent Businesses offers some pretty good guidance on how are things doing in the small business sector. Well, they report depressing conditions. They're not hiring. Optimism is down. Hiring is the worst in 2 years, and they're bracing for a shock from Obamacare. They're caught like deer in the headlights. They're not taking any big decisions right now because they're wondering if Obama will not be reelected and some of the Obamacare will be reversed with Romney.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is interesting. I think the thing I'm latching on to here is that actually there are far better statistics to give you a feel for what's going on. It's not the unemployment numbers. It's looking at payroll taxes. It's looking at Social Security deductions and so on and so forth. And I can see that those are hard figures, aren't they? I think this is really what you're saying, Jim.
Very much. And those are concurrent. Now let's just look forward a little bit with CapEx. I love CapEx because if you exclude out the military defense, which is very offensive, let's not get serious. I'm so tired of some of the terminology. It's military aggression, offensive spending, and then also remove the transportation, which is, it is part of business, but it's so volatile with, say, Boeing orders and cutoffs from, the European competitor for Boeing, Airbus, that if you cut out military and you cut out transportation, CapEx, which is short for capital expenditures, it rose only 1.1% in August after declines of 5.2% in July, 2.7% in June, and now it's flat in October. These are not positive indications for the near future. No, furthermore, the U.S. economy has got a downshift from their Q2, which ended in around July 1st. Q2, they had the GDP at 1.7%, but now they adjusted it down with a revision to 1.3%. Well, that's not consistent with strong economy. It's not consistent with anything positive. Yeah. I like to repeat, in 2009, if you even avoid the inflation adjustment, on a nominal basis, 2009 had about a 2 or 3% GDP decline. which means that after you adjust for inflation, 2009 had a worse than 2 or 3% recession. It was the first time I've ever seen nominal GDP decline. We're stuck in a 3, 4, 5, 6% recession in the United States economy.
Absolutely. And I think, okay. So any thoughts that we're getting economic recovery actually is, if you like, it's a bit of a fairy tale at the moment. There's no sign of it. And I think this would fit in very much with an Austrian economic analysis. I mean, we would, as Austrian economists, we would expect that anyway.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.